Welcome to American Narratives, where we talk about the bold, unexpected, and deeply human side of career change. I'm Marianne Pina.
And I'm Joe Fracham. This season, we're doing something a little different. We're hitting pause on the linear success story and hitting play on the pivot.
Because let's be honest, life rarely goes according to plan. Sometimes we choose change, and sometimes change chooses us. But either way, those turning points shape who we are and how we lead.
American Narratives was created by CMP to share real stories of identity, resilience, and leadership. And this season, we're zooming in on the moments when people pivot the script.
You'll hear from leaders, executives, change makers, and everyday people who've reinvented their careers and themselves with clarity, courage, and a whole lot of honesty.
So, if you're in the middle of a change, considering one, or just curious how people bounce forward, not back, you're in the right place.
Let's get into it. This is American Narratives Season 4. Welcome to American Narratives. I'm Marianne Pina.
And I'm Joe Fracham, and today we have Ken Lay. Ken, welcome.
Welcome, Ken.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
You know, there's Ken Lay could be an infamous name, but it's maybe not the Ken Lay you think it is. We'll get into that a little bit later. But Ken is someone that we've known for, a good year. We've done some work with Ken, have come to really respect Ken, both his pedigree, his experience, and what he's doing now. And I know that you're all going to really learn a lot and gain a lot from his story and his experiences today. So thank you again, Ken, for joining us. And let me give you a little background on Ken. Ken Lay is the president and founder of Perspective Always Matters, where he helps C-suite and emerging leaders navigate complexity, build resilience, and deliver results. With 30 plus years in senior roles at Fortune 100 companies, including EVPCIO at Citizens Bank, leadership posts at Bank of America and JPMorgan Chase, and earlier executive roles at IBM, Ken blends organizational psychology with hard-earned hands-on operating experience. He holds an MA in social and organizational psychology from Columbia and a BBA in finance from Notre Dame. As managing partner at the Center for Resilience, he develops neuroscience-informed solutions to counter stress and burnout. Wow, that's a mouthful and a lot to absorb right now. I love the empiricism of it. Yeah, yes. It's pretty cool stuff. So, well, let's dive in.
Well, a few quick questions for you, Ken, just to get to know you a little bit better. So tell us, what's your favorite music or band?
Music or band? So I would say currently it would be Kirk Whalum, anything from Earth, Wind and Fire, and going back, I would say from my youth, Cannonball Adderley and Stan Getz and Herbie Mann, and Marvin Gaye and the Temptations.
I love it. Great range there. Okay, tell us your favorite movie if you have one.
It's hard to pick one. I'd have to pick three.
Okay.
Casablanca, The Usual Suspects, and Pulp Fiction.
Boy, talk about a range.
I know.
Casablanca to Pulp Fiction, all pretty iconic and for different reasons kind of interesting. So that maybe a little worrisome or interesting. I'm not quite sure which one.
We'll debrief that later. How about your favorite book or author?
Books and authors. So past author James Baldwin, current author Ta-Nehisi Coates, also Howard Gardner, and I'd probably also say any Robert Ludlum, any of the old Robert Ludlum mystery spy books, novels.
Love it. So take me back as a teenager. What was your first job?
Funny, my first job was as a family liaison when Project Head Start was just beginning. While I was a teenager, I was kind of a counselor for a summer program.
Okay.
After that, when I got to college, I was a project family liaison, which basically was a family social worker for kids who were in the Head Start program.
I love that.
That goes way back.
That is cool. So let's get into a little bit more of your personal narrative. Tell us a little bit more about where did you grow up, where are you from, and who were the influential people in your formative years?
Okay. So I grew up in Brooklyn, New York. I went through 16 years of Catholic education. I was an altar boy, a Boy Scout, played a lot of street games, a lot of basketball. Um, Key influences were my parents for sure. Both my parents were tough but fair. Um, Always talked about the importance of character and integrity. So certainly my parents. My scout leader was a former Marine.
Mm.
Uh, so some of my contemporaries always credited Don with some of our growth. And through school, I had some really tough teachers, which was turned out to be really, really good. So in my formative years, I think all of that kind of shaped me. Growing up in the city, from what I understand later, I grew up in a pretty tough neighborhood. I didn't realize it at the time because you're in it, but you learn how to navigate.
You know,
Yeah.
that might explain Notre Dame a
I
little
know.
bit later in your educational experience. So
That's right. Good.
oh, good. Well, all right. So formative years in Brooklyn, and gives us a little bit of a flavor of who you are. And those formative years are so dang important, and I'm sure they still are alive with you today, even through your growth and variety of experiences. Let's start kind of in the college years. You know, where'd you go to college? Columbia, I believe, but why Columbia? Why did you major in what you majored? And start walking us through your thought process from an education standpoint.
So Columbia didn't come until much, much later. I went undergrad to Notre Dame, and
Okay.
I went there sight unseen because we couldn't afford to take trips to visit schools. And it had a good engineering school. And so that's where I wound up going. I had looked at three schools, Villanova, Columbia, and Notre Dame. Villanova, obviously Columbia is in the city. Villanova wasn't that far away, but I chose to go to Notre Dame because it was a good school and it had a good engineering school.
And so, did you graduate in engineering then, or kind of what was your studies in? What would you ultimately graduate in?
So I found out once I got there, I found out that I really didn't like mechanical engineering.
Okay.
And so I pivoted to the business school and ended up majoring in finance, and then never really had a finance job.
That happens.
To a lot of us.
Yeah,
Yeah.
to a lot of us. You know, it's funny, a quick sidelight. I was presenting in front of a group of 20 people. All had been out of college at least 20 years, a couple of years ago. And I asked them all, how many of you are in a role you even existed when you were in college? And nobody put their hand up, right? So, yeah, the fact that you didn't apply your degree is you're in good company. A lot of us can absolutely say the same thing. So you got a finance degree, Notre Dame, terrific school. What happened? Where was your first kind of post Notre Dame role? And take us through that.
So my first job was at IBM. Interesting story there because I left ND after my junior year because I had to go to work. I went back 2 years later and finished, but I had to go to work. And so they were only hiring college graduates and I hadn't graduated yet. And so I had to talk my way into the door and talk my way into getting interviewed, which I was able to do. And they gave me a bunch of tests. And they said, you really need to go back to school. I said, well, I can't, I need a job. They said, well, what do you want to do? I said, what do you got? So they said, well, you test really well for this programming stuff. You ever think of programming? I said, well, no, but I'll give it a shot. And that's how it all started. Not elegant, not something I'd recommend for somebody coming out of school, but at the point in time, you do what you got to do.
Well, and it's very pragmatic, right? And it sounds like it was assessment driven. So IBM was always quite contemporary in their talent practices. Did you think their assessments were valid? I mean, how did you take to programming? How did that go for you?
Actually, their testing at the time was very rigorous. And I did really, really well, which is that's why they encouraged me to go back and finish. And the programming, the software development worked out really well. I loved it. It was really about problem solving. And that was the facet of engineering that I really liked. How to find problems and how to solve them. And that's what really propelled me. And so I spent the first 5 years as a software developer working on automating the back offices of brokerage companies, which at the time were all paper intensive. And so we automated the securities matching process. We automated the brokerage desks. And so it was really a big back office automation process. And I was doing some of the programming for that, which was very, very interesting.
So a programmer around some seminal work at a big inflection point in the finance industry. already I can see how that probably served you well as you went forward in some of the roles you had. But how long were you at IBM before, and did you kind of go to school, go back to IBM, or kind of how did that work as far as finishing your undergrad education in IBM?
So I went back a couple years later, finished, and so the first 5 years I was software developer, and then I went to my first pivot, and that's when I moved over into the sales side, which was
Huge pivot.
which
Huge
was
pivot.
very, very uncommon at the time.
So, and this was somewhere in your late 20s, I presume, right? When you did this pivot?
This was 25.
Yeah. So a lot of our listeners are kind of thinking through where do I go from now that are roughly in that age range. Walk us through that. Can you dissect that pivot for us? What drove it? What was the risk? How'd you overcome it? And what did you learn as far as making pivots at that point in your career?
So it was interesting. I found out how much some of the clients were going to pay for this stuff I was writing with a whole bunch of other people. And I said, well, I was amazed that people were spending that kind of money. And I wondered how they got to this point of determining what they needed and why they needed it and why they were willing to pay so much for it. And when I asked a few people about it, they said, well, that's an IBM salesman does that, and he's over there. And you'll never get there because you're a techie guy, and techie guys don't do well in sales. So I talked to a few more people, and some of my managers said, as a matter of fact, I think you'd be great at it. You might want to give it a shot. So I talked to a few more people and did some interviews, and they hired me. And I had a really successful sales career, and I loved it because it was solving problems. It was identifying issues that customers had and developing solutions that would help solve their business problems, and doing it using technology. So I thoroughly enjoyed it.
So I'm going to echo a few things I heard you say. You can agree or disagree, just that I think are real key success factors in making the inevitable pivots in our career. One is you didn't listen to other people, the naysayers, right? There was some people that said, this old orthodoxy that IT does not make sales. So scratch them. But you also didn't make an impetuous decision. You went off and talked to people you respected, people who knew the role. And third, you knew yourself well enough to know that you like problem solving. You like the analytical aspects of this. So that's not confined to a function. It's a skill set you can use across functions, and the degree to which you're allowed to use that skill set, you'll probably be successful and probably enjoy the work. Do you think those are accurate observations?
Oh yeah, and my parents would have told you that I'm pretty hard-headed. And I remember when I was in high school, I went to the guidance counselor and said, well, I was going to apply what schools I was going to apply to. And he said, well, you probably shouldn't apply to Notre Dame. I said, why not? He said, well, it's a tough school and I don't want you to be disappointed. Setting those expectations really low. So that just reinforced my desire to go apply. And I remember talking to him in passing after graduation when he said, so where are you going? I said, Notre Dame. And just kept going.
I love it.
I love that.
So when I get my mind set to something, I kind of go ahead and do it.
And you want to prove people wrong. There's a little bit of a competitive juice there, it sounds like.
Also, I think part of that was when I grew up, I was a really little guy, really, really little guy. In the 8th grade, I was the third smallest kid in my class.
All right.
And so growing up small in a tough neighborhood, you kind of learn some skills that help you later in life, like being steadfast and putting your nose down. I grew late in high school. Now I'm 6'4", 220, a lot different than I was back in the 9th grade. When I was 9th grade, I was 5'1", 99 pounds.
Oh, there you go.
Wow.
So they didn't have you playing on the line if they had a football team, I take it.
No.
So that was not happening. No, but it was formative, right? So you had to learn to navigate the social milieu and dynamics probably in ways that have served you well. Because organizations are people at the end of the day, relationships and grit and determination and vision. So sales career. So you built a great, quote, sales career. Walk us through that kind of at a high level. IBM, where did you go kind of post IBM?
So IBM was like 30 years. So my sales development, I was salesman, sales manager, branch manager in Rhode Island. I ran sales training at IBM in Atlanta. Then I was an administrative assistant to a divisional president in Atlanta. Then I was regional manager. Then I was an industry director. Then I went to corporate. I was the head of internal and external education, which was all internal and external education for IBM globally. And I was also responsible for IBM's corporate social responsibility for education, which included K-12 and universities. Then I became one of the first persons named president of one of the IBM's first 3 subsidiaries. Then I did something else, and then it was 30 years. And I said to myself, do I stick around another 20 years and get a gold watch, or do I go see if I can do something on the outside? And I said, and just so happened, I believe in synchronicity. As I was thinking about that, I got a call from the head of HR of a bank who said, hey, I'm supposed to talk to you. I said, why? He said, well, I was speaking with somebody. We have this problem over here that we're trying to solve. And they said, I should go find you. So that's how that discussion started.
So you got recruited out. And it was, again, someone you knew in your network made a reference. And that's so much, we work with a lot of executives on transition. That network, you kept it alive enough to actually surface some interesting opportunities, it sounds like, even though you spent a big part of your career in one big organization. It's fascinating. Tell us about that pivot. Outside, 30 years at IBM, that could be whiplash to actually leave at that point, but you had the guts to do it. So dissect that for us.
So one of the things that we used to talk about was people who succeed or fail when they leave IBM. And one of the things, the critical thing that happened when people failed was they tried to bring all of the IBM culture with them. And the IBM culture is indigenous to IBM. It's not going to work everywhere. And so you have to figure out what pieces make sense and what pieces do you leave behind. So when I made the jump, which I thought was exciting because the head of HR said, look, we have a business issue that we need to get solved, and we think we need somebody from the outside to do it. And the issue was they had a business that had flat growth, and the projected future was -2% for the next 5 years. They said, you think you can do that? And of course, what am I going to say, right?
Yeah.
I said, I love it. Absolutely. Let me do this. And we ended up over the 5 years having double-digit growth each year.
Wow. And so was it the attraction of a new challenge, knowing yourself that it's a new problem, the competitive juices that were alive in your early 20s are still alive a little later in your life? It's interesting. Did you second guess yourself before making the move, or were you just ready to hop?
So, I've said for years, there's a reason why the windshield is the size it is and the rearview mirror is the size it is.
I love that one. I'm going to have to take it.
Yeah, I may plagiarize that one. Us and a lot of our listeners, actually.
Right.
That's a pretty good one.
So no, there was no misgivings at all. It was full steam ahead.
All right. So you pivoted out there. You were excited about the opportunity. Glad you did it. It sounds like, because if you're in a stagnant, even declining market, to grow double digits, that's a whole episode in and of itself. We won't dive into that because this is about careers.
Right.
But walk us after that. What was your next pivot? Because I know at one point you worked in a public sector role.
So at Chase, that was my first role in that business. Then I moved over to the technology side. I kept going back and forth between business roles and technology roles. I was the head of project management at network services globally. So I had about 1,000 project managers spread from London to Hong Kong. And then I went and did a consumer products job. I was head of one of the consumer products businesses for a couple of years. And then I went to B of A. I had a technology job, consumer infrastructure, banking, everything that tied together the ATMs, contact centers, and branches technologically. That was my thing. Then I was the head of market research, which was another big shift. because I had never done market research before. Very interesting job. Had about 100 PhDs in my organization. I learned a lot. And we did some good things. And then one Saturday morning, I got a call from somebody who said, this was in 2008 after the election, said, could you be around this afternoon to talk to the governor-elect? I said, this is Ken Lay. I don't know who you're trying to talk to. You're the one. You're going to be around this afternoon? I said, sure, I'll be around. So the governor-elect called and said, asked me if I would be willing to be the Secretary of Revenue for North Carolina. Long story short, it turns out their group, the Finders Group, found me. Somehow my reputation and expertise preceded, and she thought I'd be perfect for that role, running a key agency for the state of North Carolina. And she also said, they told me, my search committee told me that if they called, you'd say no, but the best chance was if I called. And so she called. And, how do you turn that down, right?
American Narratives is brought to you by CMP. For over 25 years, CMP has provided talent solutions for companies across industries. We have a presence in every region in the United States and globally.
CMP provides innovative, high-impact solutions across the full talent lifecycle. This includes enhancing careers while mitigating the risk of a downsize event through high-touch, high-tech outplacement and career development offerings, taking the guesswork out of hiring through high-definition recruiting and predictive assessment, and building capability through assessment, coaching, and training solutions.
And as a minority and woman-owned firm, we are deeply committed to making our world a better and more inclusive place.
Please visit us at careermp.com, where you'll find a number of resources to support your talent and development needs. Again, careermp.com.
Hope to see you soon. Mm-hmm.
Well, let me ask, because you've been an executive in private industry. I'm sure it doesn't pay as well. That's for sure. Why did you say yes? Because you could easily have said no. Who needs the headache, less money, the pressure, the stress? Mm-hmm. That was a pivot. Was it based on legacy, impact? Kind of dissect that pivot for us.
So yes, she said, look, I can't pay you what you probably make in the private sector, which was clearly true, by a wide margin. But I've always been a proponent for giving back. I have given back in boards. I was a volunteer with the New York City school system, high school dropout prevention program. I would go around and talk to the 10 worst high schools in the city. I talked to the faculty and the students. I've always been very, very community-based because I think it's the right thing to do. And the country was in a ditch. North Carolina was in a ditch. And the governor asked me to help. So how are you going to say no? I think that's something, it's your civic duty to do what you can to help. And so I figured, well, I'll give this a shot and, see what I can do to help. It's my form of giving back. And when people call and they ask you for help, there's only one answer.
Well, and for those younger listeners, that was a really stressful time. 2008, crash based on mortgages, and there's a whole, there's a whole ecosystem there that just fell apart. And books and theses and dissertations have been written on it. You couldn't have found a more stressful time to move into a role like that at a state level, at a substantial state at that, North Carolina. So how long were you there in that role?
A couple of years. And North Carolina was the 8th largest state in terms of revenue. And I was responsible for bringing in $26.9 billion in revenue a year at a time when people don't realize how bad the economy was and how close to the brink the country was and a lot of the states were. We were really on the edge. We were on the edge of a cliff.
Yeah. And we really were. It's funny. And the retrospect of that is too big to fail. And there's banking. And my guess is, given your experience both in problem solving, banking at the highest level, different venues and types of banks that obviously had to be saved and go through a process, you were probably the perfect profile for that at the time. even though it was your first public service job. How long were you in that role for?
2 years.
Okay.
2 years. And interesting, the early on, I got called by the finance committee to come over to the legislature, and they wanted to talk to me. And they asked the question. They said, "Look, we're in a ditch." These are their words. "We're in a ditch. How much money can you raise without pissing off the taxpayers?" So I ballparked a number. Went back to the office, and they said, "We hope you didn't commit to anything, because those guys will always be after you." And I said, "Well, not too much." They said, "How much?" I said, 100 million. They all passed out. Look, we got to think this through. So I got all the heads together. We spent a whole day in a room and came up with an idea of going back to all of the CFOs in companies that owed the state money going back, as I recall, 11 years. And so I sent letters to 325 execs that said, if you and your team come here and sit down with my folks, if we can come to a reasoned settlement in line with the law, you just pay what you owe in interest and I'll forgive the penalties, which I was empowered to do. And in 6 months, we raised over $500 million, $524 million
Wow.
in 6 months. So what it really speaks to is all of that untapped potential that was already in the department that we just needed to unleash. It was trying to figure out how do you solve a major business problem, and it was major.
And I love that you got people in a room.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't you just deciding and being brilliant on your own. You got a whole group of folks close to the problem, challenged orthodoxies, and said, where's there hidden some ability, and you executed against it. So that's one of those cool seminal moments for you, I'm sure.
Well, see, when it comes to tax, while I knew a lot at the end of the 2 years, I didn't know anything at the beginning. And so I didn't have any tax knowledge at all, but I knew how to solve problems. So
Yeah.
I put the best tax minds in the room, and we argued and fussed and fought and put things on a board and took it down and erased stuff and put it up. And at the end of the day, we all said, hey, we think we have something here. This thing might work.
Yeah.
So it was really trying to get the best heads in the room and getting the best ideas on the table. And one of the things I said was, look, no idea is a bad idea. Nobody gets shot down. We want to hear every single perspective, and every person spoke up. And we fought, we threw ideas on the table, but what we came up with was solid and sound, and we executed it. And in 6 months, we brought in over $500 million.
Very cool.
Amazing.
Very cool. So 2 years work, a huge ROI at a time in which they needed you and your expertise, obviously as a leader and also finance professional and everything else. Where'd you go after that, after your 2 years with the government?
So I went to Citizens Bank. I was a CIO for Citizens Bank in Boston, the CIO for the commercial bank. And at the time, they were in the midst of implementing a new IT system, their first in 25 years. And so you can imagine how hairy that was.
Yep.
And that was my first role. My second role was Chief of Staff for Business Operations, which included ops, technology, security, supply chain, and property.
All right. So back to banking at a large scale, introducing some level of change, which was obviously across the system. So was that your final banking role, or kind of when did you pivot to what you're doing now, and what are you doing now?
So after 40 plus years in the corporate world, I said, I always tell people, when it's time, you'll know it. And somehow it occurred to me, I think it's time, been doing this a long time, it's time for me to, retire again. I think this is my third time. I'm an utter failure at retiring. So we left Boston, went to Florida, and there was a wager how long it would take me to get back in the swing of things. So after about 4 months, I figured, I've really done a lot of organizational change and transformation. And I did it from a practical, pragmatic point of view. I wondered what the theory is behind it. So I went back to Columbia and got a master's in organizational psychology. And when I finished that, I started teaching strategy at UCF, undergraduate and graduate. And I also started consulting. And then I also started coaching.
Yeah, and not coaching the football team, by the way. I assume it's coaching, executive coaching. Yeah, and the fact you went and got a graduate degree, after you'd retired is, I've known one or two others that do it, but that is a big commitment. That is really shows a dedication to learning and growing kind of later in life, and others maybe aren't so motivated to do that. It's interesting.
I think, personal opinion, I think we all need to be learning machines. I think learning is a lifelong thing. I think you're either growing or you're dying. And part of growth is learning, having the intellectual curiosity to continue to learn new things in new ways. I think it's vitally important. And so even during my IBM career and after, I attended programs at Stanford. I attended programs at Harvard. I went to the School of Negotiation at Harvard, which I thought was a marvelous experience. Went to classes at Center for Creative Leadership. So I think one should never stop learning.
Well, let's do that then. And we're going to ask you a little bit about kind of golden nuggets to distill down for our audience, and then what are you doing now? Let's start with the golden nuggets piece.
Yeah.
Our listeners are out there. They're a little earlier in your career, anywhere in their 20s, 30s, maybe 40s. What advice would you give them as they consider making a leap or trying something new in their career?
Well, one thing I'd say is progress is rarely linear. Some people have the idea that it's going to be a step, or leap. Nah, it's going to be more like a sailboat. You're going to be tacking left and right and making progress. But so progress is rarely linear. Secondly, like I said, never stop learning. I used to say, always be an expert at two things. Because one of them is going to be obsolete in 5 years. As a matter of fact, I was at a reunion about 6 months ago, and somebody there reminded me that I told him that 20 years ago. So I thought that was interesting. Also, I'd say another thing is invest in people and relationships and understand the importance of relationships throughout your career and really hold on to them. Always try to leave things better off than when you got them, than when you got there, and enjoy the ride because it's fun. People ask me sometimes, what was my favorite job? I said, that's a really tough question. I've been very fortunate. I've had some terrific jobs. They all had challenges. We had a good team, always had good teams that we put together, and always did well and always had fun doing it.
Well, you have a very unique career path, starting with, hey, you can't get to Notre Dame, to being an executive and even an executive in the public sphere during very tumultuous times, and having major impact at scale. It's pretty impressive, actually.
It really is. I want to add to this too, Ken, right? Because when I think about people that fail at retirement, right, what's a golden nugget for them?
You got to keep the brain cells firing. It's the same thing. You're either growing or you're dying.
Yeah.
And so I don't think that changes. And I really believe that one, if you've got a lot of experience, then you owe it to society to find a way to give back. You owe it to yourself and society to continue to contribute in some way that is meaningful for yourself and the community that you happen to live in. And so I think it's very important for me to get involved in executive coaching, because I've been where people want to go. Somebody told me a long time ago, when you're in a position to hire people, don't hire people who hire people who've been where you want to go, not people who want to take you there.
Interesting.
And I thought that was really profound, and I obviously never forgot that. So if you have all of this expertise and experience, it helps to share it and not just keep it to yourself.
I love that.
Love it. Terrific. Well, where can they find you now? Say they want to reach out, learn more, connect with you as part of their network, or even learn more about your executive coaching.
So my website, as you might expect, is Perspective Always Matters. www.perspectivealwaysmatters.com, because I really believe that all perspectives matter. That's why you've got to put as many voices around the table as possible, because as diverse as the group is around the table, that's going to reflect in the quality of the outcome. And so you've got to encourage a psychologically safe environment where people can feel open to debate, have dialogue, to come up with the best solution. So it's perspectivealwaysmatters.com.
Terrific. Well, that's perspectivealwaysmatters.com. And we'll obviously be listing your episode out there. And CMP can obviously we've done some work with you and look forward to doing more work with you in the future too, Ken. So consider yourself part of the CMP familia.
Outstanding. Thank you very much, both of you, Marianne and Joe. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today, Ken.
Ken, thank you for sharing your wisdom and insight, and best is yet to come, my friend. More to come.
Thank you so much.
You betcha. Right.
American Narratives is brought to you by CMP, a talent and career transition firm providing solutions across the full talent lifecycle.
From recruiting to talent development to outplacement, we help leaders improve our world through deep insights and impactful talent solutions.
For more information, visit us at careermp.com.